This composer is an ardent, lyrically inspired romantic. In Piano Concerto Number 4, he did not stint on impudent toccare and intense harmony. And how different my music sounds! I was sure that nobody could play better than me. Who is this brilliant pianist? He was called the most unpredictable musician of our time. An electric charge of 6,000 volts, a virtuoso of the 20th century, the incomparable Ukrainian pianist Volodymyr Horowitz. Where Volodymyr Horowitz was born is not known for sure. Some sources claim in Berdichev, others in Kiev. However, biographers do agree that the future pianist was born in 1903. The musician's father, Samuel, graduated from Kiev University with a degree in electrical engineering. He came from a wealthy family and founded a company. You can find adverts in the newspapers from those years. Samuel Horowitz, electric motors, pumps, bulbs. He was a supplier of the Southwest Railway. He married Sofia Bodik, who bore him 4 children. Volodymyr was the youngest. Volodya began playing piano at the age of 5. He enjoyed music lessons. The boy soon began to please family members with extraordinary pieces that he had composed himself. The family simply thought yet another composer was growing, as there was no thought of a virtuoso pianist. The National Tchaikovsky Music Academy of Ukraine is one of the oldest and most prestigious higher musical institutions in the country. The official opening of the Kiev Conservatory took place on November 3, 1913. 9-year-old Volodya had piano lessons here. His teachers were the eminent pianists Serhiy Tarnovsky and Felix Blumenfeld. He discovered his unusual musical talent after a year of studies, during which he played almost all the piano works of the German composer Richard Wagner. Turmoil came to Ukraine in 1917. The Bolsheviks also affected Horowitz's relatives. My family lost everything in the space of 24 hours. I saw with my own eyes how they threw our piano out of the window. The family had no money at all. Volodya agreed with the staff at the conservatory on his early termination from the institution in order to earn money during concerts and help his relatives. The teachers did not mind, as the young man with such talent no longer needed lessons. At the exam, I played Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto Number 3. It is a very difficult and at the same time interesting work. The composer is my idol. I couldn't even dream that fate would give me a friendship with this great Russian genius. The first listeners of the young talent were citizens of Kiev, as well as the general public in Kharkiv and Odessa. Horowitz played for factory workers during their lunch break. Volodymyr enjoyed real success in Moscow and St. Petersburg. He was invited to give a concert in Soviet Russia. The grateful public called Horowitz the Franz Liszt of the 20th century. But the maestro didn't see any prospects in the Bolsheviks' country. The cultural development of Kiev at the end of the 19th century took place against the backdrop of economic development in the whole country. Capital was growing and powerful banks opened their doors. Ukraine became the birthplace of sugar kings and the city on the Dnipro Hills, a large commercial and economic center. The Council of Elderly of Kiev Merchants Assembly built a stone house for its club. It was within these walls that the history of the National Philharmonic began. Volodymyr Horowitz gave his last concert in his homeland in 1925. Franz Liszt sounded. The Soviet government ruled in Ukraine during this period. Volodymyr Horowitz was never able to accept its ideology and decided to go abroad, although later he admitted that this step was not easy for him. After all, his parents in France remained in Kiev. He hoped that as soon as he'd settled, he would take his family with him, but these plans did not come true. Horowitz would never visit Kiev again. Germany, 1926. For the first time in the history of the country, a referendum was held on the expropriation of princes, and Berlin met sports fans at the World Figure Skating Championships. In 1926, the first Horowitz concert outside the Soviet Union was held in Germany, but the young musician didn't succeed at everything in a foreign land. The first two concerts in Berlin were a flop. Volodymyr was fond of relaxed music, but the German public didn't appreciate it, and these were difficult times. Germany was flooded with crowds of immigrants from Russia, ready for any job, just to be able to put food on the table. Horowitz got help at the first stage of his emigration. To save his meager savings, he managed to smuggle them across the border in a sock, but the money melted catastrophically. But one incident changed everything. At the hotel, they came to me, still an unknown performer, and suggested I replace the female soloist who'd suddenly fallen ill. They asked, "Can you play Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto Number 1 in 2 hours' time?" I agreed and got to the hall without any rehearsal. The conductor was the venerable musician Eugene Pabst. The conductor, not really hoping for a good evening, simply asked the pianist to follow the orchestra, like, "Watch my wand, and nothing bad will happen." After a few bars, the stunt conductor watched the soloist and followed his play. When the concert ended, the audience bought up tickets for a solo performance by a Ukrainian pianist in an hour and a half. This is how the musical life of Volodymyr Horowitz began in Europe. In Paris, after the debut, Review Musical magazine wrote, "Sometimes there is an artist with a genius of interpretation. Liszt, Rubinstein, Paderewski, Chrysler, Casals. Volodymyr Horowitz belonged to that category of artist kings." He was invited to visit the big cities of Europe. During his tour, which lasted a year, the pianist gave 69 concerts, which gave him great popularity. Horowitz didn't want to return to the USSR. He knew the Bolsheviks well, as they dropped his family. Meanwhile, in Paris, the Soviet consul threatened him with punishment if the pianist did not return to his homeland. So Horowitz decided to flee further to the USA, a country in which the fame of a virtuoso pianist could turn into a good living. In 1928, Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin, the franc was devalued in France, and Herbert Hoover became President of the United States. It was in this year that the American page opened in the book of Volodymyr Horowitz's life. My career in the States began as in Europe. From the Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto Number 1, I came here to get applause, fame and wealth. Here I will often play the works of Wagner, Chopin, Liszt, Rachmaninoff. This was the next page of my life. After his solo program, Horowitz had, according to the Times periodical, the most stormy meeting a pianist could count on. The audience went crazy. Critics wrote, "Young, handsome, confident, with the ability to subordinate any concert hall and any orchestra to the sound of his piano, an enchanting virtuoso. he was doomed to success, and he got it. Volodymyr Horowitz quickly surpassed most modern pianists in the number of released records. The Great Depression covered the United States for 10 years. The stock market crash began on Black Thursday in October 24, 1929. After a small short-term rise, securities began to lose value. October 29th is known as Wall Street Crash Day. Horowitz lost his savings on this fateful day for the US economy. The conductor Arturo Toscanini became famous for 17 seasons of radio concerts with the New York Radio Symphony Orchestra. With this team, he toured South America and traveled around the United States. Fate brought the country together with the Ukrainian immigrant Horowitz. Visiting his senior colleague, Volodymyr met the beautiful Wanda, the maestro's daughter. It was from then on that American aristocracy accepted the musician into their circle. A special piano was created to his order, and paintings by Picasso and Degas appeared in the maestro's art collection. He had everything. But a few years later, Volodymyr Horowitz cancelled all his concerts and plunged into depression for a long time. Neither a loving wife nor friends and fans could help. His father-in-law was the only person who was able to bring the musician out of this depressed state. It was Toscanini who made the Virtuoso return to the stage. Horowitz realized that those who criticized him for being too emotional, unsettled, with a harsh manner of playing were in some ways right. He began to play in a completely different way. In my opinion, it was then that I began to relax and make music. In any case, in music, I've now found what I had not noticed before. The United States entered World War II on December 7, 1941, after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Horowitz gave countless concerts to raise funds to fight fascism. He received American citizenship for this. He worked hard, learned new works, but he fell into depression once again. My God, the audience was sitting right on the stage and I was going to play Chopin's Polonaise for an encore. I had no more strength and felt that my heart was broken. The tension was terrible and it really seemed to me that I would die before I finished it. When I played the last chord, the usual applause sounded. I heard a man saying to his wife, "Oh my God, have you ever heard something like this? This is nonsense." She said, "Listen, he'll play again." "Nonsense, just wait. He came, still play, more. That's it. I could no longer play." By that time, father-in-law Toscanini had died. Horowitz had nobody to return him to living. He announced that he would no longer perform. Audio companies managed to persuade the pianist to record the sonatas of Scarlatti and Czerny, who were usually studied only as educational exercises. A mini studio was installed in the Horowitz residence. The walls became the only listeners of the great pianist for a long 12 years. And there was something sad. His daughter committed suicide. He also remembered other old wounds. His mother died after he left the Soviet Union. Father was sent to the Gulag. His sister Regina taught music at the Kharkiv Conservatory, although Volodymyr later recalled that she was a better pianist than him. For a 12-year pause, the pianist had to sell almost all the paintings in his collection. But it was very hard to sell the Acrobat by Picasso, whom he considered similar to himself. He sat in the art gallery for hours, and in so doing irritating his wife. Miss Wanda played a prominent role in the life of the maestro, but they were very different. Wanda was an aristocrat and Volodymyr was a keen man, an artist. He was called a wild cat, even a panther. It was impossible to tame him, but could only be perceived as he wanted to be. Wanda ran the household but could not influence her husband in a creative way. None of her arguments, what to perform, where to perform, worked on the maestro. Here he showed character, and in everyday life he often became helpless. Sometimes Wanda said with sadness, "He doesn't love me, but he needs me, otherwise he'll end up badly." New York, on the corner of 7th Avenue and 57th Manhattan Street, the legendary Carnegie Hall awaited visitors. This concert hall was opened in May 1891, with a concert by a symphony orchestra conducted by Petro Tchaikovsky. "He's back." That was how newspaper headlines described the announcement by a spokesman for Horowitz that the pianist would appear again on the Carnegie Hall stage in 1965. A crowd of fans lined up for tickets for the Horowitz concert. The pianist's wife was horrified by the hardships that people subjected themselves to for the sake of happiness from listening to her husband. She handed out coffee and pies in this line all night, music critic Harold Schomburg recalled. He looked exactly as he did at his last appearance 12 years ago. High shoulders, the body is almost motionless, slightly tilted to the keys. Only the hands and fingers acted. For many young people, it was almost as if Rachmaninoff or Liszt was playing, the legendary pianist everyone is talking about, but nobody has heard of. The brilliance of his technique, but a narrow repertoire, the same supernatural freedom of playing music, but a more careful approach to the material, the same sparkling sound, but now with more expressive means. It seems that the pianist is telling his fans, "Listen to the music and not me." Critics wrote, "If I lived at a different time, talent, which was suddenly revealed to the world, this hitherto unprecedented dexterity, skill, would certainly be called devilish. And if we don't mention dark forces now, where else can you find the source of this incredible speed of his fingers? Each finger behaves as if it lives its own musical life." The main thing that is so attractive about Horowitz is that he keeps his demon in check. This is probably the main charm of his playing. Over the years, the performances of Horowitz became dissimilar to the interpretations of other pianists. During studio recordings, the virtuoso played the same thing in very different ways, with an interval of several minutes. It was impossible to determine which performance was the more perfect. Many of the composers with whom Horowitz communicated permitted the performer to edit their scores. Individual passages often became almost impossible for other pianists. New York Herald Tribune reviewer Alan Rich wrote, "Time didn't stop for Horowitz in the 12 years that have passed since the day he last appeared in public. The dazzling brilliance of his technique, the implausible strength and intensity of execution, imagination and colorful palette, all of this remained intact. At the same time, a new dimension appeared in his music. Horowitz made us feel all the doubts that had disturbed him all these years. He showed what a precious gift he possessed." A separate page in the life of the pianist is devoted to his friendship with Russian composer Sergei Rachmaninoff. These two people remained close friends until death. A small number of performers can boast of such understanding with a composer of music. Volodymyr idolized the opus of Rachmaninoff since childhood. Playing them from the age of 7, he created an idol and was not at all disappointed in him after their meeting in the USA. Horowitz said, "I am a tree, but I don't know its height, and Rachmaninoff is the largest tree in the world." On one occasion, Rachmaninoff was present at the performance of his very own Concert Number 3 by Horowitz. A very shy composer sat in the last row so nobody would see him. When the performance was over, he got up, went through the entire concert hall, and shook the pianist's hand. This is exactly how I always imagined my concert, but I never thought that I would hear such a performance. After that, Rachmaninoff just deleted Concert Number 3 from his own repertoire, although he wrote this work for his own performance. We finally played Concert Number 3 together. Rachmaninoff was the orchestra, I was the soloist. We played for each other, composer and pianist. From time to time, Horowitz disappeared from the stage, but his audience remembered him. They were waiting for him. His last period of performances began in 1985. This was a time of an unprecedented upsurge in mental strength, in the complete absence of physical obstacles. So Horowitz would remain in the memory of the grateful public of his last tour to Moscow, Vienna, Milan. He wrote, "An artist who is forced to face the public constantly becomes empty without even realizing this. He constantly gives, not receiving in return. Years of refusing public speaking helped me to find myself and my own real ideals. During the crazy years of concerts, I felt that I was dumb, spiritually and artistically." 5 days before his death, the maestro wrote the etudes of Chopin and Liszt, Wagner's Nocturne. He tried to combine common sense, heart and technology in the performance. But this was the last work of the famous Ukrainian. His life story ended at the age of 86. The name of Volodymyr Horowitz only appeared in Kiev in 1995, when the International Competition of Young Pianists was organized. This musical competition for many winners became a springboard for worldwide recognition, and maybe someone will one day say about them, "He plays like Horowitz." Playing the piano consists of common sense, heart and technical means. Everything should be developed equally. Without common sense, you will fail. Without great technique, you're an amateur. And without a heart, merely a machine. That's why the profession is fraught with danger. Volodymyr Horowitz.